Welcome back. This is Sue Your Baby Daddy with Single Mom Attorney. Today, as my guest, I have Angee, one of our amazing associate attorneys here in our Houston location. And very, very cool. Today, I actually have not only a mom, but also a process server, right? Wendy
Yes,
Williams.
yes.
Today, we're going to be talking about geographic restrictions. So we got a Reddit submission, and it's by Fancy Purchase 3040. So her thing is, surprise relocation case question. Single mom in Connecticut. My son's father served me with papers after we had a plan for me to completely fund a vacation to Florida to check out the area that we were looking to move to. Now he says, well, since you have a new boyfriend, we're not moving anymore. Mind you, we haven't been together for about 7 months. At this point, I had been seeing this guy. So this court filing came out of nowhere to me. We had a good co-parenting situation and an agreed upon schedule, or so I thought. So in my counter for custody, I added in relocation due to that being the plan. I have family down in Florida and friends that were made since living there for a couple of years in the past. What are your thoughts on relocation? Let's talk about geographic restrictions. I just want to know who in the legislature was like, let's make sure that baby mamas live next to their baby daddies. Like, who thought that was a good idea? Honestly,
It's a terrible idea.
Always, always, always ask your attorney about that when you're doing final orders. I mean,
Yes.
because these guys get jealous all the time. And it's just because they just find out that, okay, she's with someone else, no longer able to manipulate or control. They want to
And
say
the
no.
ego. It's like, oh, well, I don't want another man raising my child. So
Absolutely.
if my child is not in the same city as I am, I have zero control over that.
And let me also back up a little bit. Geographic restrictions, it's a provision that you can include in a custody order that requires the primary parent, I guess you could call them, to live within a certain geographic area next to or within the same area of the noncustodial parent, right? So if we're in Harris County, your order may say, you know, mom, you can decide where the child is going to live because you're the primary parent, but you have to make sure that the child resides within Harris County or a touching county. Now, the cool thing about geographic restrictions is if you have the right attorney, they're going to make sure that there's a provision in the order that includes auto lift language. So basically, what happens if baby daddy moves, but then you're still restricted to live within that geographic area? Well, then the order could say that it's going to be automatically lifted and it would free you to move anywhere else that you want because he moved, right? The whole rationale behind the geographic restriction is to make sure that, you know, the non-custodial parent still has equal access to the child. But I mean, to me, I really do see just a huge game of control happening with geographic restrictions.
I totally agree with that. And what I also will say is that you guys don't like each other anyway. I don't understand why any court would be requiring you to live close to one another. And they say it's in the best interest of the child, but the arguing and the fighting and the discussions can kind of get contentious whenever you're trying to maintain those geographic restrictions. So I think in my experience, I've seen a lot of things get out of control. And then we have to go back to court to do modifications on that language, and it's just not financially a good thing. It's just not emotionally a good thing for the child because the child is therefore in between you and him. So when you're going through these kind of things, make sure you ask about geographic restrictions because, like I said, you don't like each other anyway. So don't, feed that animal is the way that I see that.
Yeah. Wendy, do you have a geographic restriction in your order?
I do. Or I did.
You did?
I did. So we had a geographical restriction where if non-custodial parent lived within 100 miles, we had a standard possession with a little bit of tweaking to it.
Modified.
Because at the time that the order was written, my child was 3. And then we kind of modified it a little bit to accommodate school schedules and things like that. But during COVID, baby daddy decided he wanted to up and go and not say a word.
He didn't let you know about it?
No, he didn't.
What? When did you find out? How'd you find out?
When he stopped picking her up. He just completely just went ghost and
he ghosted his kid.
Oh,
For how long?
It was 9 months.
Oh.
And then I background him.
The baddie process server that she is,
Yes.
right?
She did it.
And a new address populated. And I was like, you?
Yeah.
And I went ahead and had a process server serve him for, just contempt. And then I went to court. He actually did not show up. So I went to court, and judge lifted my geographical restriction. I'm still in Harris County,
right?
Because right now this is where my support system is. But now it makes it harder because he's got to do all the transporting. He has to come back and forth. He's in an hour, 45 minutes away. So he's got to do all the back and forth.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
I definitely see a trend in the courts that if a parent wants to move outside of, I guess, the area where their co-parent lives, they don't really get a lot of like mercy or leeway. Like, it's one of those things where I've actually even seen courts reduce the child support that mom would normally be entitled to, so they can order under guideline child support if mom's like, hey, I want to move, like in this case, I want to move to Florida. And then the whole rationale is that they're going to say, well, now dad has to book flights, now dad has to, spend more money basically to go see his kid. So for that reason, we're going to give him somewhat of a financial break and reduce the child support. I've had clients that they're okay with that. They're totally fine. They're like, I don't care. Like, just let me move, which is just a really sad thing to even have to express. Like, just let me
bargain.
Move. Right. And it's like, a lot of the times it's not because they're moving with their new boo. Like, you know what I mean? It's because
job opportunities, family connections.
We were just talking about how expensive childcare is. And if you have your immediate family, like maybe maternal grandma lives out of state and she's like, I'll watch your kid for free. But then your order says, no, you have to stay in Harris County next to your baby daddy. It's like, that sucks, because who's really funding the childcare bills?
Exactly. I have a friend, actually, someone that I know who's dealing with those situations. And I'm like, he doesn't help. She pays all of the child care. He doesn't do very much to, he really doesn't even, like the courts say it's a duty. I mean, it's not a duty, it's a right.
It's a right.
And so, possession and access when it comes to those things. But come on, the guy never shows up on time. If he does show up on time, or he calls randomly, after not having seen the child for a lot of time. And she foots all the child care bills. She foots all of the daycare, the aftercare, because now the child is in school. So she foots the aftercare bills. And so she asked for a lift in her geographic restrictions. And unfortunately, judge said no.
Yeah. And you know what?
Judge said no.
I've actually seen where the courts will basically, like if mom moves away to another state, and even before they have a court order, like if I just separated from my baby daddy and like we're both living in Houston, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go move with my mom, right? Like, let's say my mom lives in California.
Right.
Then if baby daddy gets me served in California, they could say, Mom, you got to move back. You've got to move back.
Yes.
And it's like you could have your whole life established over there. And honestly, there's a lot of moms that when they moved out of state, they wait to establish that jurisdiction to be able to file in that state, because it's less likely that, it's not like California's going to say, oh, yeah, sure, like we'll do your child support case, but go back to Texas with your baby daddy. It's like, no, you're living in California now, It's just... It's really unfortunate. And honestly, Wendy, I think that what you did was so smart, because she looked at her situation and she was like, these are the current facts. The current facts are that baby daddy has been MIA for, what was it, like 9 months?
9 months.
Right? 9 months. And instead of her waiting for him to re-enter the picture and being like, okay, now my kid doesn't want to go with you, so I'm going to file for a modification and, maybe a little bit more restricted possession and access. In this case, if I was representing you, I probably would have asked for like a notice of intent to exercise too. Absolutely. Because if he's flaking on you or he's just not showing up, who's still responsible under the court order to make sure that they're there at the place of exchange? You. Because otherwise you could be found in contempt as well, right?
Correct. If I don't show up.
If you don't show
every
up.
single first, third, fifth Friday, if I'm not at that meeting location,
right?
Even on summertime possessions, things like that, I can get held in contempt.
Right.
But why am I going to sit around and wait for someone who hasn't shown up in 9 months?
Exactly. And then, I've seen that happen where now all of a sudden they want to show up and they're like, oh, well, she's not here. Of course you wouldn't be here. What kind of logical person would be showing up first, third, and fifth if he's not around?
For 9 months at a time. Come on.
Right,
That just
right.
makes
And
no
then
sense.
they'll start throwing out, oh, you don't let me see my child.
kid.
Oh,
Right.
I love when they say that.
You don't let me see my child. I showed up after 9 months.
After 9 months, like, do I have a crystal ball? Like, are you just gonna show
We have these things called phones.
Yeah,
right.
Use them.
Like, what is that?
Exactly. No, for sure. And honestly, like in those situations when I'm consulting with the mom that's been in that situation or is currently finding herself in that situation, it's like, if we're going to file a modification, I'm asking for a notice of intent, which is just basically saying, hey, if dad is going to exercise his time because he can't be relied on to show up, he needs to give her X amount of hours notice confirming. Otherwise, he forfeits his possession and access for that weekend. So it's like, that way mom can go on about her day and her life. And if he's not giving me that confirmation notice, then I can make plans.
Especially with sports.
With sports.
Yeah.
Especially with sports, because you pay these fees to enroll the kids because they don't have anything else to do on the weekends anymore. And now dad wants to pop up and says, well, it's my time period, I'm not taking them.
Have you ever experienced that before?
Yes, I have.
Oh,
Really?
that's
Yes.
That is crazy.
Yes.
But I do know that, when you enroll these children in sports activities, you pay for a certain period of time. You could be paying for like 6 weeks, 12 weeks, so on and so forth. And I haven't seen you in 9 months. And then you all of a sudden pop up on your so-called weekend. And it's like, I haven't seen you in 9 months. But I really feel like you did an excellent job by, going to the courts and taking care of that. In my experience, I do make sure that I say, I argue for legal fees in those aspects. Like, we usually in petitions, most attorneys will place, something in our petition asking for legal fees, but I also argue for legal fees because through no fault of your own, okay, he disappears for 9 months and then you have to go and take him to court. I don't feel like it's fair that you should have
Just
to pay.
protect yourself and your child.
Right.
Correct.
Not to inconvenience him.
Correct.
It's for your protection because otherwise, if you steer away from your order, you get held in contempt.
That is absolutely true. So I will argue. I know a judge told me to shut up one time, but I will argue
She
for
said,
that.
I'm asking for these attorney's fees, baby.
I need these fees because she didn't do anything wrong. He did. He needs to pay.
That's wild.
Yes.
That's wild. Yeah, no, and I think that what you did was really good because so many moms wait until they come back into the picture and then it's like, well, now the facts are different. Now the facts are dad wants to re-enter the child's life, which is great, if he's consistent, there's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, it's like, I can't go in and ask for, reunification visits, like when he's already been reunified with the child and, things like that. I can't really ask for as much of a step-up schedule in the event that he comes back into the child's life because he's already back in the child's life. And then now we have a child that just doesn't want to go to the other parent's house because they're like, where have you been? Sometimes it's more than 9 months. Sometimes we're dealing with a dad that's been MIA for 4 years, 5 years, and I tell people that too, like whenever we have a baby daddy in prison, it's like, if he's going to be a baby daddy that eventually comes out while that child is a minor, if it was me, I'd be filing while he's in prison because those are the current facts that are setting up my case. That if he comes out, I mean, by all means, that's not to say he can't be a father, but it's like, we need to set some boundaries. We need to set some things in place to where this child doesn't feel like they're going from 0 to 100 just because they have
relearn the other parent.
Yeah.
They don't know them. They 4 years, they don't really know them. And it's very difficult on a child to like, okay, it's your weekend now. I haven't seen you in 4 years. You've been in jail.
I'm going away from my bed, my clothes.
Absolutely.
Because then you run into the non-custodial parents that they're like, well, you keep, your stuff over there. You'll keep the stuff that I buy you on my side. And that's kind of like, well, wait, my favorite dolls are at my mom's or at my dad's. So I have to decide where I want to be to play with my dolls.
I hate to get those cases when they just came out of prison because I'm like, dang, we could have got sole custody. We could have got sole conservatorship. But we still work our way around those geographic restrictions and make sure that, that client has a voice because a lot of times, clients, they just kind of feel like they don't have a voice in the court system. Like, I have another friend who just went in front of the judge and she was just so upset. She walked out of there. She's like, what just happened? Because they just don't feel like they have a voice. So we kind of work that in to make sure that our client gets a voice and we get to explain, look, this is what happened in the past. And so this is where we are right now with this set of facts, but this is what happened in the past. And we try to make sure we get that in. Yeah.
The whole thing behind a geographic restriction is public policy, right? Like I said, they want to make sure that the non-custodial parent has just as much access to the child that the primary parent does, right? And so what I'll usually tell people is that if you're going to ask for a geographic restriction to be lifted and they see that y'all do not get along, the chances of you getting that lifted have just gone down, because they're going to be concerned that you're not going to help facilitate that long distance relationship between your co-parent and the child.
Yes.
You know, and it's like, for example, I mean, are you going to be answering FaceTime calls like when you've moved, right? You wanted to move, you wanted to be closer to your family. Okay, great. But what if dad is calling to speak to the child and you're like, I just don't get along with him? The courts are going to see that. Yep. And then now it's a concern of theirs that, well, now the child is going to be the one suffering from, you know, having
alienation.
Right, alienation. And there's actually 8 factors that we can argue to get a geographic restriction lifted here in Texas, or just simply ask that not be placed at all. And just because the more you know, the first one is the reasons for and against the move, including the parents' good faith motives in requesting or opposing it. So basically, like, why are you moving? I mean, are you doing it out of spite? Because that's not going to help. Or are you genuinely moving because you got a job opportunity, or because, you know, you have family over there?
Got into university, got into law school, you know?
Right. The second one would be health, education, and leisure opportunities afforded by the move. And that's not necessarily just for the child, you know? Because one thing that I don't like to see is when the parents are like, oh, well, they have better schools over there for my kid. Okay, so you want me to go before a Texas court and a Texas judge and say the schools here aren't good enough? No.
Not gonna work.
Right. So, I mean, some things could be health, because maybe there's like a specialist out of state, you know, leisure opportunities. I mean, just anything that could fall within those 3 things is a second factor. The third factor is the degree of economic, emotional, and educational enhancement for the custodial parent and the child, right? So at that point, we're talking about economic enhancement. So can you save money by moving over there? You know, can you, I mean, with that factor, I would be arguing childcare. Like,
absolutely,
I'm going to save myself $1,700 because my mom's going to watch my kid, you know? And that means that I don't have to fund a childcare bill. Or, you know, maybe I'm going to go live with my parents and they have an extra room for me and my son. And now I don't have to pay rent as a single mom, and, you know, suffer here just because I've got to live next to my baby daddy.
Can you imagine not having to pay rent now? That's like $2,000 in your pocket right now. You could be saving for your child's education with that.
Absolutely. And then the fourth one is the effect on extended family relationships as well. So, I mean, if there's family out of state and everything, I think I definitely ask that, because sometimes I've had moms that want the geographic restriction lifted because they have friends, but then all of the immediate family lives within Texas, and I'm like, okay, well, that we're going to have a weak spot in that factor, you know? Right. So really at that point, I'm looking at, I mean, are you moving for a better job opportunity, or, you know, college or something like that? And sometimes college doesn't even work, because it's kind of like, well, can't you study the same thing here?
Yeah.
You know?
They'll be like, there's a lot of Texas universities.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know, colleges are going more virtual.
Yeah,
right.
That too. And then it's like, so you're going to go and pay out-of-state tuition. Like, they start thinking about everything, and they're really like, why is she really asking for the geographic restriction to be lifted, or, you know, just for there not to be one and put in place at all? So then the next one is accommodation of the child's special needs or talents. So, you know, maybe we have a child that wants to go study at Juilliard, and like, there's plenty of counselors that are saying this child has so much potential, and, you know, they're not reaching their highest potential here in Texas, or somebody with like a modeling or an acting career, child
they got a scholarship for sport.
And then the next one is the effect on visitation and communication with the non-custodial parent to maintain a full and continuous relationship with the child. And that's where we get into, do you get along with your baby daddy, and are you going to help facilitate that long distance relationship between him and the child?
That's right. And every time you get in front of the judge, you better know they're going to grill your attorney about these things left and right. You'll be sitting in front of the judge, and they'll be saying, well, you know, Attorney Chavis, blah, 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 blah. And you have to really give a succinct and a good answer to the judge, because they'll deny you in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they don't take time to...
and the first minute you create any doubt or just look like you're just not...
you don't
getting along with your baby daddy,
right?
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
it's over. You know, if you're just salty or petty or anything like that, that is going to destroy your character.
I totally agree.
Absolutely. And then the second to last is the possibility of a visitation schedule, allowing the continuation of a meaningful relationship between the non-custodial parent and the child. So with this, it's like, you know, is there a workable visitation schedule to where the non-custodial parent is still going to have a present and active presence, you know, in the child's life, right?
I always ask, what does this look like to you? You know, what does it look like to you? What does exchanges look like to you? Whenever, is someone going to fly with them over to New York? Is someone you're going to have someone who
and put it in writing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Put it in writing. Oh, well, I paid for it last time.
Oh, no, we can't do that. Who's going to pay? It needs to be in the order. We also need to know how it's going to happen. How are you going to facilitate that?
Are they flying Spirit? Are they flying Frontier?
Or are they flying as an unattended I mean, you know, a minor where that has to be,
especially as a
flight
mom,
attendant, you know?
Like, I don't just leave my babies just anywhere with anyone.
That's just not.
And I'm going to put them on a flight?
Yeah, that's not good. That's
I've definitely seen that in mediations where the non-custodial is saying, yeah, I live far away, so put the child is old enough to go to the airport and fly by themselves, which is to some extent maybe true, right? But then also, like, as a mom, you're like, you're asking me to put my baby on a flight? Like, I'll pay for my own flight and go and make sure that he's attended. Like,
and I've done that.
Yeah.
I have done that. I have paid for my own flight so that my daughter can have her visit with her dad.
Wow.
Just make sure you do stuff like that. It looks good to the judge. Yeah. It really does.
But also to your child. Because I read something and it's going to stick with me forever. It says eventually the children get old enough to see which parent was the problem.
Right.
And if they see, you know, mom has done everything possible for me to have a healthy relationship with my dad, then that's all that matters.
I'm definitely like that with my son's father. I'm like, if he calls, I'm calling him back. Like, always helping with, you know, FaceTime calls. I mean, that's why I tell, you know, my consultations and my clients, I'm like, look, I know it's frustrating. There's a lot of days where I feel like I wish I could just block my baby daddy, right? But we're not going to do that because that's going to turn around and bite us in the butt, right? Like,
exactly.
I mean, we've seen cases where you block your baby daddy, not necessarily on social media, but you cut off that line of communication and you move. Well, guess who's getting primary now?
Right.
So now you've just completely uprooted the child, right? Said, I'm not going to be in contact with my baby daddy anymore. And if he files, they're going to say, well, you're alienating this child.
That's true. You know, I do try to caution my, you know, clients sometimes against doing too much because, you know, it's their responsibility to build a relationship, but don't make it look like in any way that you are not facilitating that relationship. You know, give them the phone, they can call. I mean, there's so much communication, FaceTime, text.
My baby daddy has not answered a phone call from me in 7 years, actually.
Wow.
If it's not texted, like, he will ignore it and say, text me, I guess because, you know, he wants to make sure that he has it for court. And I'm like, hey, I'm just calling and, you know, put your daughter on the phone. I'm calling from my phone, but it's your daughter.
It's not that serious. Oh my
child
gosh.
wants to talk to you, sir.
Like, her tablet is dead, so she's using my phone.
Dang. And then the last one is the ability of the non-custodial parent to relocate. So at this point, is it possible for baby daddy to relocate with you? Like, these are the questions that they might be asking as well. Or is he stuck in Harris County because, I don't know, he works for NASA? Like, I don't know, you know, but I mean, those are the things that they're looking at. There's 8 factors. And just because you as a mom can say, oh, I've got really good arguments for the 8 factors, we've still seen a lack of success in that arena in the courts where the judges are just still not buying it. Like, they're like, no, I mean, geographic restriction stays in place and we could have the best arguments. It's a really frustrating topic because I'm like, if you have a child with the wrong person, that could restrict you from opportunities. It could limit you, you know. Now you can't apply to jobs out of state. Sometimes, like, God forbid, you live in a rural area and it's like you're having to live in like a small county. And that's another thing they look at too if they're asking for 50-50, you know. Like, if y'all are like, oh yeah, I'm going to do 50-50, it's expected that a geographic restriction is going to be maintained in place because how else is it going to work unless you just completely abate the 50-50?
Exactly. You know, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. You need to be kind of close to that person to kind of make and facilitate that relationship. And it's your responsibility, you know, to do the best you can to facilitate that relationship. Don't overdo it. You don't have to keep calling him every time he doesn't show up, you know, but just make sure that you're doing your part. I always feel like that's something that, you know, I try to advise my clients, you know, just make sure it looks like you're doing your part.
Okay, and Wendy, I have to ask, like, what does your baby daddy think about you being a process server? Like, your job is to literally go out and...
My goodness. Well, again, we don't communicate unless it's, you know, via text.
Yeah.
But I have heard through the grapevine that, you know, he thinks it's... it's a manipulation tactic because I'm so good at what I do.
Oh, wow.
And that I kind of probe and ask questions that I already know the answers to, especially to his parents and things. And I'm like, boy, your mama love me.
Right.
She loves me. She told me what you did last summer. I ain't even have to ask. But obviously, I can't personally serve him. But if I do have him served, I always request they wear a body cam because just seeing his face is like
yes. You know, we have a server too that we use that he wears Ray-Ban glasses, and so it's like they don't know that he's filming, but it's like that those glasses are catching everything.
Love it.
You know,
Love
and it's amazing.
yes, there's so much technology now.
But you've lived that, so I think that you're good at your job because you have that lived experience.
And it was during COVID that I actually got into it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the PI side of it. Since I was a teenager, I was just crazy, and I was just a natural born stalker.
Yeah.
But
Snoop.
yes, I can find anything in like 5 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
But with process serving, I was so scared on my first process serve.
Oh,
I was terrified. I'm like, well, what if they throw the papers at me when they open the door? Like, oh my God, what if they punch me or something? Honestly, you would see that it's not that hard. And the only time it becomes difficult is if they're dodging. And those are the ones I have a blast with. Like,
really?
it's a field day.
Alternative service, baby. Alternative service.
I had a client who she's like, I was referred, a mom group on Facebook. They said you're the best.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, girl, come on, give me the papers. So I went and I attempted at his home, but he did not answer. And his truck was in the driveway because I ran the plates.
Yeah.
And they came back registered to him. So I texted his phone number and I'm like, hi, I'm outside to deliver some court documents to you. And he's like, allegedly not him. He said, this is his cousin. He no longer lives here. I said, well, your cousin's so nice that he left you his house and his truck.
Love it.
So the next text message after that, he said some very ugly words, which I shared it with the attorney who was prosecuting the case.
Yeah.
And she loved to see that.
Which probably makes a really good exhibit for
Yes.
the alternative
service.
service.
Yeah.
Yes. So 2 days later, he posts on his Instagram story saying, hey, I'm going to have a crawfish boil to celebrate my birthday at XYZ Main Street. And, here comes Miss Process Server. And I was looking really cute that day.
She said say less.
I was looking so cute that day, and I fit the event basically. And I went up to him. It was a day party, so it was packed. It was so packed, and I loved it because he had like a bunch of females around him. He's pretty big in the nightlife, and I go up to him and I'm like, oh my God. Hey, John Doe, how are you? And he went to go embrace me with a hug, and I handed him the papers. He said, whoa, what is this? And I walked away, and it was July. But something in me, I was like, Merry Christmas. And I walked away. It was like a reaction. I guess I was like kind of nervous too, because I'm like, I'm not in my hood right now.
Love it.
But yeah, and then he actually followed right behind me and started taking pictures of my car, which is super important as a process server to really know where your vehicle's registered to. Always have a business address. Even as attorneys, I know that's really dangerous.
Yeah.
So always watch your six, as my husband would say. And
I love it. I love that story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you were able to join us. Angee loves that you were here as well.
I do.
And I can't wait for y'all to watch the next episode. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about next.